Okay, it's 7:09 PM, and I'm calling the August 6, 2024 Planning Board meeting to order. I note for the record that this is an in-person meeting. The Zoom access is not available, but this meeting is available for streaming now and will be available on YouTube. So in light of that, I won't announce that we're live Zoom. We're not, owing to some technical issues. So I'll start off by calling roll. So when I call your name, would you please indicate that you're present? Pat Norton.
Present.
Jonathan Poor.
Jonathan Poor, present.
Bill Wheaton.
Bill Wheaton, present.
Emil Dahlquist.
Emil Dahlquist, present.
Darcy Dale.
Darcy Dale, present.
Matt Hamel.
Matt Hamel, present.
Mr. Austin. Jeff Austin, sorry.
Jeff Austin, present.
Mental block. And Marnie Crouch, present. And I note for the record that Beth Herr is not here this evening. So I think I'll take our approval of the master plan as the first order of business, if no one objects. I would like to get this master plan approved tonight. I think everyone has had more than ample opportunity to make whatever suggestions they want to the document. I think that the input that we've received from members of the planning board, and I know Darcy, you've been extremely conscientious with your edits. I know Jonathan had made contributions to the implementation charts, and Pat, you went through it with a fine-tooth comb and had some good suggestions, and I know other people have contributed as well. But of course, Emil has taken the laboring oar and provided much of the commentary that makes this document, I think, a much more readable and inviting document for the public to consider. So I don't know, Jack, if you have any comments about the master plan, since you're the only one here in the audience.
No, I mean, at some point, I would like to raise issues right about Patton Park and Railroad Avenue sidewalks. Then that might be appropriate.
Well, I think the master plan, encompasses those, if not directly, indirectly. So right now, we don't have Patton Park in front of us. There's a plan for Patton Park. But certainly when we go forward, as part of the implementation of the master plan with the form-based code, I believe the consensus is to try and integrate Patton Park with the downtown in a way that makes it more usable and more aesthetic and et cetera, et cetera. So I hope that sort of addresses your question. So does anyone have any final comments about the master plan? I confess I read it again. I found just a couple of very, very inconsequential, well, every typo was consequential, but I found some very, very slight edits for Emil. Really, two of them there appeared to be an underline between spaces. I mean, that kind of nitpicky stuff. But if anybody has anything to add, now's the opportunity to raise it. Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to approve the master plan, and we'll go from there.
Well, I just wanted to say, last night, Bill Wilson complimented the planning board on the rewriting, well, not rewriting, but the improvements of the document. And he said he had started out being a little, out of sorts that we were looking at it, but when he read the final document, he was very, very pleased. So I just wanted everyone to know.
Oh, right.
Select board chair, well, no, he's the vice chair, but he went out of his way to compliment the writing.
Oh, I'm really happy to hear that.
Yes.
That's great.
Yep.
That's great. I'm glad. I actually am really pleased because I think that the document that the planning board has produced in approximately 3 months has vastly improved a document that took 2.5 years to get to where it got. So I think we did a yeoman's task in a short period of time, given that we have to have, that we meet twice a month and we have to, have our discussions in a transparent and public setting. So I'm all ears.
I just have one other comment, and that is, I'd just like to thank everybody who participated in making the modifications to the plan, and especially those who put in the extra hours. So, Emil, that'd be you. So, thanks.
Then I make a motion that we adopt the master plan as the planning board has amended it.
Second.
When I call your name, please indicate that you approve the motion. Pat Norton,
Pat Norton, aye.
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Abel Dahlquist, aye.
Darcy Dale,
Darcy Dale, aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye. So now we will transmit this document to Patrick, and we will need to put it in, we will have to insert some maps, right?
Maps in the appendices, yeah.
And was the intent to have this as a bound document available to the public or just online, Patrick?
We hadn't made that decision.
I think in my opinion, I think it would probably be wise to have several hard copies of the document, maybe for the libraries and the Hamilton Wenham Library, and to have it at Town Hall and Senior Center, because not everybody will have
Right.
access to it.
Actually, one of the things we also need to do is send a copy to our good friends at EOHLC.
Oh, well, I'm sure they would probably prefer a digital copy, do you think?
They have a library,
Oh, okay.
as does MAPC, so, to your point, having a certain amount of hard copies is a good thing.
Right.
We also would want some here in the library, too.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And probably, 5 or 10 here in the library.
Sure.
If people wanted to access it. So, yeah, that will, you'll have to undertake that and see, how you will go about reproducing the maps and adding the maps that are omitted from the digital copies that we've shared, adding those maps in there, and then putting the hard copy together. So, what an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Bravo.
Yay to us.
Just one other thing on the, Patrick, when the maps go in, they're probably referenced in the text very close to where the map is. What the final numbering is on the maps, I don't know. But if you do it by section, as the charts were, then all the numbers change in terms of map number, whatever. So,
Great.
so if you could just review the text where each map is inserted.
Coordinate.
Thank you.
Okay, so then we can turn to a brief status report about the comprehensive plan for the town center.
Okay, I'd like to make just a few comments and then ask Jonathan if he would like to comment as well. Since our last meeting, there was an advisory committee meeting on the 8th of July. And then subsequent to that, we thought that having an interim workshop to kind of pick up the progress a little bit because of the short timeline we had held a workshop on 7/22. Jonathan was leading that, so I'd like him to talk about that briefly. And then, then maybe a lot of you saw the public engagement on July 25th. That was with UTEAL in the Miles School all-purpose room. And that was attended by maybe 50 people, maximum, I would say. And our next advisory committee meeting is on the 27th of August. So it's a long period of time between meetings on the advisory committee. And Jonathan and I felt to have another interim meeting would be really valuable, because we're still trying to plug in information with committee members who are willing to attend on their own time, essentially more than what they had committed to. So we're probably going to conduct that next week. We're looking for dates, availability of a space, and then dates of people who could attend. So, Jonathan, do you want to say anything
Sure.
further?
So essentially, the advisory committee joint meeting and the advisory committee workshop was based on the same information that was shared at the public visioning committee, the public visioning session. In fact, the public visioning session at this point has more documents from UTIL. So anything that's been looked at by the advisory committee is also something that's the documents are public record from UTIL at this point. And the only difference was that it's a smaller group of people, and the great thing about the workshop was it was very similar to the workshop that we did with the planning board for the Gordon Conwell process, which was basically laying out the maps on a table and being able to sit or stand around them and people speak freely. So that was very effective to do in person, and so folks were very thoughtful in their comments, and then we try to capture all of those comments, and now we just need to review, in a sense, the notes of that meeting to make sure everybody agrees that we've caught what they've said. We've captured what they've said. So
Sorry,
that's
Jonathan,
basically it. Sure.
are you referring to the last visioning session at the middle school?
Yes, so in other words,
That was
there's
similar?
no addition, there was much more additional information at the visioning session at the middle school was provided to the public than has been provided to the advisory committee. So in other words, we're a step behind in that data. We're back at the sort of very broad mapping, inventorying process.
Do you mind if I give just a feedback from the crowd perspective? Having attended both the initial session that Emil mentioned, and then again on subsequently the latest one at the middle school, along with, I encouraged other people to go also. I guess I'll start with, I've been part of a lot of these types of things in the past for big biotech and everything else, and the biggest failures on some of these efforts have started because they begin with the wrong goals. And it's not because you don't have the right resources participating in the effort, but the effort gets mismanaged. And I feel like this effort, both things are happening. We're starting with the wrong goals when asked about where the goals came from, because they read very much like the HCC goals. In the last session, the leader in UTIL, the project manager, explained to me that those goals came from the planning department, which we saw them for the first time with you guys during the initial session that they had here in this room. I feel like they've diverted away from the initial set of goals that we had established as being a form-based code project, and are now being led by leadership in town to essentially develop a way to conform and adhere to 3A and take advantage of the Winthrop School property. It's being communicated that way. It has been at the outset of both meetings. That was the initial topic of conversation in their presentations. In the last session that they gave, they basically had just taken pictures of downtown properties and measured them, and then asked for feedback on how they're doing. The presentation that they gave was all one-sided, and they said afterwards we'd have a chance to participate and go to the boards and they'd be there to talk with us, and nobody was back there. It was like just an ad hoc discussion afterwards, and the colleagues that I brought to participate in the effort were like, this is what you guys do here? This is like, we just heard their presentation, and they gave basically their resume and what they had done for Littleton or wherever else, and it's the same effort that, a lot of the presentation was the same as the initial one. I'm not just being negative, because, you have people who are willing to participate in the effort who could give positive influence to the outcome. Those people are being left on the sidelines. I had basically begged to be part of the effort. I see it failing completely. What the town has continued to say is that we're going to go through this effort, and you have an opportunity to vote whether or not you like it. Well, it's not really the goal of the effort. It's to engage, to develop something that everyone will agree with in the end, I think is the goal, probably, in the end. Not to spend the money and go through the effort and say we tried to conform with these rules and laws and then have it be voted down by the public. It's been a very, the advisory board was not given access to the information on the presentation that 50 people in town participated in and spent the evening away from their families, trying to influence the outcome of it. You know, the advisory committee had no idea what the presentation was going to be about. I don't know what is being advised in the effort. It's just, I feel like the tracks need to be reset, or we need to step away from the effort and revisit what we're trying to do. Because right now, all you see are people coming with signs. I mean,
Right.
people literally came with signs, and it was combative. Instead of asking questions, it wasn't a visioning session
Could
at
I
all.
just interject just
Yeah.
one thing? And
Yeah.
I just want to address 3A very, very briefly, okay? Right now, the town of Hamilton and its officials are not really pushing 3A. If they were, we would have something in front of us so that we could meet the December 31st, 2024 deadline.
Sure,
And
yeah.
there is absolutely no possibility of doing that and no intention of doing that. So I think it's a bit of a misconception to view the town as pursuing 3A with all alacrity and whatnot. And in fact, the town, the select board last night was presented with the first draft of the amicus brief that the town is intending to file in the litigation involving the town of Milton and the Attorney General. So the town is making arguments that the guidelines are, the legal terminology is ultra vires, but beyond the scope of the statute, so to speak. So the town is actually being very thoughtful about this and trying to, steer a course that will protect the town. They're making the argument that this is not a good thing for Hamilton, but by the same token, as responsible, town officials, they have to, in some sense, be prepared if that litigation were to result in a very unfavorable ruling, such that the law and the guidelines were deemed to be mandatory and that the Attorney General could actually enforce the statute. So they have to actually have that in the back of their minds. I think the intention is, to try and convince the Supreme Judicial Court that the guidelines and the parameters set forth in those guidelines as they apply to Hamilton are really should not be upheld. So I think that what happens sometimes is the anti-3A derails the discussion of the form-based code, which is, in my mind, what we really want to be pursuing. So I'm going to let Emil speak to that.
But just in response, I totally agree with everything you just said, but I've been at the last two sessions and have listened to the presentations, and I'm coming from an educated perspective on having managed these before, and I'm just saying that my concern is that it's being mismanaged.
Right, and look, you're speaking to someone who's familiar with what happened with the master plan,
Yeah.
where we had consultants that spun their wheels and then we had to switch gears and get other consultants.
Yeah.
So I think that with that knowledge, what you're saying probably resonates with some people.
Yeah.
I can't say in town hall because they're over in the Patton Homestead.
Right.
But I'm hoping that what you, and I watched the YouTube video.
Yeah.
I have family obligations, I could not
Yeah.
be there, but I watched the YouTube video, and so I'm aware that there were certain definite issues, and the YouTube video, the audio was very difficult. I mean, I couldn't hear the audience, but, so I understand where you're coming from. Do you want to say something, Emil?
Yeah, I do. I appreciate your comments, and all of the things that you said, many of them are absolutely right and did not go unnoticed, and we're in the process of trying to create a remedy because we've now lost some time. And, they never, I don't think any of their presentations were ever finished, with UTIL. But I think the two big issues, public engagement, the messaging of 3A, and also communications between the consultant and the town has to change, I think, at this stage, because we're really entering into a very critical time in this whole process. We have not begun the visioning on this. We haven't even started the regulating plan on this, which is the organizing principle for the whole downtown. And we're coming up to the next presentation by UTIL mid-September. Starts with a code kind of beginning. This is not going unnoticed, and we are currently working on that, and Patrick can tell you that, to trying to remedy it, because it is a problem right now. And we had to let them sort of start off with the way they wanted to proceed, but it's pretty clear now, we have to take other steps. Having been I was part of the original steering committee on the master plan, and they literally took the whole summer off, their first summer on that project, with nothing accomplished, which was months of work. And I'm not trying to disparage Weston and Sampson, but we can't avoid that again, or we can't have that again. And we're certainly going to do what we can. I know Jonathan and I are giving up a lot of time to prepare and document these meetings so they have some information from the people that is valuable for UTIL to use and to hang their hat on, and that we as a town can approach them saying, look, how are you dealing with this? This was raised by the public. How are you dealing with it? So we're trying to have a much more interactive engagement with them through communications on a regular basis. So, hopefully that's going to change from now on. But I appreciate your comments completely.
I would agree with a lot of what you said as well. And again, to Emil's point, it hasn't gone unnoticed. And I think an opportunity might be maybe in the setup of the website to not just rely on the survey for feedback, which is kind of a yes-no binary kind of thing. It might be nice to encourage pieces of that, online sort of process to be a little bit more open-ended, so that you could actually express some original thoughts, and that might be a suggestion that could be discussed, so that you're not stuck in a binary answer to a survey. Because I think they are looking, UTIL seems to be looking for input from the townsfolk, and the challenge has been that there's been, for good reason, a lot of disruption, and the task is to try to get past that to the content, to the purpose, to the goals. And what I would say is that what has been more successful, just as I mentioned in the planning board's Gordon Conwell process, getting out of a Zoom process, getting out of a sort of a large group process, there's been the ability to get into the more nuanced why the goals, get back to the why are we doing this? And so I look forward to more of that and feeding that to UTIL, and then hopefully that will be productive. And I think any ideas for creating more varied and individualized public input to UTIL from the community beyond, like I say, binary surveys, I think would be positive and helpful, and I would look to other people for additional ideas like that. So, yes, I agree with you.
Yeah, one of the ideas that was put forward was creating some kind of separateness between 3A and a downtown revitalization.
And that's been acknowledged very overtly, so.
They are working on that, and they're going to keep them.
Well, there's also the school.
Up to a point.
I mean, you have three things
Yeah.
going on
Yeah.
here. You have 3A, you have, the idea that there's some future potential commercial revitalization downtown, and then you have the school. And I bet you, 30% or more of the people at this meeting are aligned with each of those objectives, but they're they're crisscrossing, they all intersect.
So I think there's opportunity for this to turn around, and I agree with the comments that you're making. And I think the opportunity is to find constructive ways to get those comments out there and constructive alternatives to make this operate in a more productive way. So I encourage more comments and more feedback. And I'm going to promote for some sort of venue for those things to have a forum.
Well, speaking for myself, and obviously not for the planning board, but my hope would be that the form-based code would be a separate vote from a 3A district. I think that the benefits of the form-based code, I think, could garner a lot of public support. And in my opinion, that it's almost impossible to think about 3A in an intelligent way until we have more guidance from the Supreme Judicial Court. I mean, until we have some rulings about some of the key questions that the SJC identified, it seems to me almost impossible to do something that might ultimately not be prejudicial to the town. So, and again, in my view, and I could be wrong, that the development of a form-based code is a much greater lift than actually some type of an overlay district that would track the actual language of the statute, which would be, there's as of right zoning within this district at a density of 15 units per acre, subject to site plan review. So I'm not saying that that code would be a couple of paragraphs, but I don't see the scope of it or the difficulty in writing it in the same manner as the form-based code, which has to have much more detail and pictures and maps.
The other thing that's helpful to remember is that because the process is fairly complex with many layers, some invited, some not invited, 3A, it's hard to lay out an exact strategy of how you would separate the issues in advance. It's much more feasible to first gather the data, create kind of an ideal, set of goals and plans, and then see where and how you can separate things. And again, I think that that's really in everybody's view an ideal way to do it. It's just a question of how to do it. And so to some extent, it's a matter of being patient and letting the data unfold and tell a story of how best to separate the issues. So those ideas are not off in the background, they're in the foreground.
I guess I'd feel a lot better about the whole situation if I knew that. I guess it's nice to have one project manager in an effort, and if I knew that you and Emil had the responsibility and authority to govern and guide how the process is being developed and managed and executed, then I'd feel a lot better about it. But if you're not, then in whatever we can do to help support you being able to be put in a position of authority.
We can influence, what I described when we had the workshop, what I said is we're really not an advisory committee, we're really a focus group, is really what we are. But so can you be. So, and again, I would say, not to overwork this idea, but I think a great thing would be to create some better forums for public interchange. And so that's, again, something to promote.
Well, I will add to this then. Obviously, as part of the master plan, we've been talking about fostering cooperations between boards and committees, and I think that one of the things we've talked about is an implementation committee. So I am recommending that we have a joint meeting with the select board at some point so that, for example, you can express your concerns about this project and basically that the planning board and the select board can speak with one voice about some of the issues. And I know I've watched the workshop that was conducted by the Select Board, or certain members of the Select Board, on July 29th, and there are things happening at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, and certainly Joe Demilowitz and some members of the Select Board can speak to the Planning Board about that. And so there's a conversation that should happen between the Planning Board and the Select Board. And particularly now that we have a master plan, we can really start developing how we want to work more cooperatively, and not just the Planning Board and the Select Board, but the Planning Board, say, and the Conservation Commission, because we have overlapping responsibilities and issues. And so I will, speak to Patrick about that and see when that could be scheduled. So,
Can we add one more thing to that agenda in the discussion is the town hall renovation and Patton Homestead. The person I invited along with me that evening, his wife has a private business, and Patton Homestead was typically a place where residents of Hamilton, if they have their own business but couldn't operate out of the home, could rent space to operate out of, but that's no longer available as an option to the people of the town because the town is occupying that space. And I understand they're occupying that space now with no plan really in the renovation of the town. I drive by it every day and there's really nothing happening. They don't have bids for the project. There's
I think they
not
might
an
have
expectation.
I think they might have bids.
They didn't as of
Bids
like
are
a
too
few weeks
high.
ago when I dropped off the computer
They
in the town
came.
office. They were like, we don't have bids, we don't know what we're doing, we don't know how long we're gonna be here for. I'm like, all right, well, that's
Patrick,
concerning.
Does the
Yes,
town
it is
have bids?
concerning.
They have bids and they came in over estimate.
Right.
Well, I could have told you
So,
that would have happened
yeah.
months ago.
That's what happens.
So why
That's
did we
the special
leave the
town
town
meeting.
hall? Did it get condemned?
Yeah.
Did the building
No.
inspector condemn it?
No,
Why did we leave?
that was a
I don't understand how you leave.
decision
without having
by
a budget on
the
how to
town
renovate it.
manager and the board of selectmen.
That's, to me, unfathomable. It took away a town resource
Yep.
and added expense
Yep.
without any idea how much whatever was being proposed was gonna cost to renovate. What is happening?
Well,
Put that on the list.
that wasn't, that fortunately, that decision wasn't one that we made. So that really is beyond our agenda this evening. So,
May I, going back to this question, is there 2 or 3 conflicting cross currents about what to do with downtown? There's still 2 background questions that I think are essential to coming up with any answers. The first is we have not had a study, an economic development study done of what the commercial potential of downtown Hamilton is. I think it's 0. I have watched vacancies rise and rents fall, and I've been a part of enough retail developments over the last 50 years to know that supply does not create demand. Supply responds to demand. And I think there's myths out there that a lot of people believe if we just get the land, we'll build something wonderful, and, companies and stores and everything else will come and provide us with tax dollars and economic development. And I'm highly skeptical of that. And there are companies that don't do any design work. They just focus on questions, consultants, about, what are companies looking for? What do retailers want? What's the status of our current commercial base? And, do we really have any potential down there? And because if we don't have any commercial potential, then we're left with, housing as the major use. But I think that's really an important thing to get some insight on. The second thing is, I've been talking to people in other towns about 3A. There's all this talk about, we began to look into how many people were actually using the subway or using the commercial, the rail line, and we decided we don't want to be part of the MBTA anymore. Now, whether you can, voluntarily leave the MBTA district or not, I'm sure that'll go through court at some point.
Do you know we pay over $400,000 a year for the privilege? We pay that to the MBTA every
So now you come up to the question, and so these towns are also asking and not yet getting the data that the MBTA has on usership and ridership. They get, weekly, monthly data, in terms of, everything is electronic now, so they know how many people have passes, they know how many people used the pass that day, they know how many one-off ticket sales there were, and it's all part of a big database. And if they're demanding money from all the towns, then the towns certainly have a right to get that data back and say, hi, Hamilton, this month your ridership was this, and last year it was this, and before COVID it is this, and it has come back or it has not come back. This is not something that we should do any work on. This is something that the MBTA should be sending, monthly reports or at least yearly reports to all of its communities on ridership. So if we pay $400,000 and we only get, $4,000 of 4,000 riders a year, well, that's $100 a trip. Okay, and you have to really say, do we want to do that? And then you get into the question of, can we withdraw from the MBTA district? And why don't we know those numbers? Why don't we even engage in that? And before we try and build a development around the train station, let's ask the question of how many people use it. Now, I tried to find that out. One Wednesday, I got 93 cars at 4:30 in the afternoon. The next Wednesday, I got 38. And then the following, it was all over the place. I have no idea whether the people parking there are actually using the train. I know they're supposed to be. But I just, that was, provided me with no information at all.
Bill,
Can I
don't
also,
you have a graduate student that could?
I don't want it, I want the MBTA to send me a monthly report.
No, but a graduate student to dig into it and try.
No,
and
you
get
can't do that unless you're part of the MBTA. You have to,
No, they can make it their life's
no,
mission to get
the cars aren't the answer. The cars aren't the answer.
No, the MBTA has the data, how to get the data. And
You have to get it, you have to ask the MBTA.
public records demand or something.
Well, that's a possibility.
But you
But
know-
then the question was, who's going to start this ball rolling? Maybe our state rep or somebody could say, pass a little,
3A actually has nothing to do with transportation.
It has nothing.
And
it has everything to do with transportation.
it actually doesn't, because the E EOHLC said that now these state-run zones or districts can be anywhere in town. And I was looking at the map that they sent out a couple weeks ago, I guess it was, and they have already shown areas in Hamilton, including my house, where towers, where it's highly developed.
Yeah, but if you're Topsfield, you're not part of the MBTA, well, then this is a moot point, right?
Well, what I'm saying is, they don't really care if it's built around transportation.
I think they originally did. They realized.
That's
they
right,
could
and
not
there was
afford
They
also an
realized what a
affordable
hornet's nest
housing
that was,
component.
that was turning out to
But
be.
there's no longer an affordable housing component either.
So,
I agree
but
with Bill, we should get some data from the MBTA.
Yeah.
they should send it out to all of their tax-paying,
We're not
member.
very transparent here.
Pre-COVID, it was no secret. The MBTA has been running in the red for years.
Yes.
Now we have COVID. They have less ridership.
I hear conflicting stories about that. In the subway system is still way down, but I don't know about the commuter rail.
Yep.
But they have all this data, and it's part of their monthly accounting. They can just spin off reports to
So I used to
this.
work with the Markley Group, which is the biggest co-location in Boston, actually in the eastern seaboard. It's a co-location for all large enterprises to use data centers at that one location. And I talked to their sales engineer guy there all the time. Boston is down 30% what they always used to run. Everybody's moving out of Boston. It's not just Boston, it's metropolitan since COVID. So they're down 30% of what they usually utilize for data centers in the city.
But, we might have been on a growth trend, and then we flattened. Another town might have been on a decline, and then it bottomed out. 10 years' worth of data would be hugely informative about what the status
Bill,
is here.
I don't disagree with that at all. Let me just go back to the code for a minute, because what this is looking out 20 to 30 years. Nothing is going to happen immediately, and it may not be before 10 years or 15 years before anything happens. So the whole idea is to put a plan in place so that if something does, and this would be kind of mixed use projects anyway. We're not going to do any particular big box thing that has only one potential use. So part of it is flexibility, so that you can sort of accommodate the change in the market by changing the tenants in a particular space. As far as the housing is concerned, there has to be significant housing in a downtown to make it viable, to make it a more vibrant downtown. You can't exclude residential developments in a downtown, so there has to be some residential component. To me, the question is how much, and the data that we're looking at, there are a lot of guidelines that say, for a town the size of Hamilton, these are roughly the statistics that you should look at for a balanced downtown. Residential, somewhere around 40–50%. Then you have the civic, about 10%, and you got commercial, mixed use, some combination of all of those things that are roughly in that balanced scenario will give you a better chance for vibrancy. Now, I don't think the economy is going to stay the same for the next 30 years, so things will change. The rail line is, I think the idea came from California, their transit-oriented designs out there. It was feeding the suburbs of San Francisco, providing rail lines and building them close to railroad stations, light rail mostly, and they were very successful for a period of time. There's no doubt that the MBTA is in desperate need of a change to make it convenient for people, make it more reliable and safer, frankly, as a mass transit type of facility. So I still think, because one of the concerns was if, and I'll just throw it out there, if the Winthrop School was approved, or the consolidation school, and if that Winthrop site became available for the town, the town's going to sell it to somebody initially, and that somebody is going to look at the current codes that are there, which are conventional codes, and they're going to develop it the way they think they can make the most money. And they'll submit it to the town for this long process of trial and error for approval, even special permit. So what the town is doing is saying, okay, this is a potential we know. Why don't we plan for it in a way that's most beneficial to the community and look out for the community's interest at the outset? Write the code that way to guarantee that it's going to happen the way that people want it to happen. That's the strength of the code. It's just empowering the people to make a lot of the early decisions on this rather than the reverse process, which is the way it is now. Wait till the end, then go through these long planning board meetings and deciding in the end through a special permit process, you're going to approve it or not approve it. And that's not an efficient way. It doesn't benefit anybody. And so the idea is that if the town decides what it wants, why not build it that way and make it easier for the developer to get an approval, because that's what the community wants there. So that's sort of the rationale. Things are not going to, even if you wanted the town to stay exactly the way it is, you've got to change your codes, because things are going to happen in the downtown. Properties will change hands, and it will be developed under the conventional code, and you have no control over that other than a special permit, which is really
So I think form-based.
bad way of planning.
That's really needed, I agree. I think
Yeah.
it's good for the town, but I think that builds.
It's a long-term, yeah, I don't disagree with Bill.
Having an economic study can only help, right? So
Yeah.
what if Winthrop goes away? And then we have a form-based code that says we can have mixed use in there. Wouldn't you
there-
want to know from an economic study, what is that site best used for, rather than having something dump in there and be empty
Yes.
store space forever?
Yeah. We had hoped that there would be an economic consultant as part of the team with UTIL. That has not happened yet, so we're kind of pushing for that. But the three things that are going to really control how much the downtown gets built are water supply, wastewater treatment, and the economic prospect, how much.
I know, but let's back up for 1 second. Suppose your economic analysis says, well, there's really, very little demand for anything on the Winthrop School. Maybe you could sell the land for $500,000. And, then you go to the town people and say, $500,000? Why don't we turn it into an expansion of Patton Park? If we're only going to get $500,000 for it, let's, build another swimming pool or build tennis courts or build something else. I mean, the Patton Park is a great resource in the town. Everybody loves it. And it's so knowing that, the land has considerable value or has no value is very important in determining, how you think about this. I don't have a specific proposal, but we're still missing two important ingredients, which is the economic potential and, how important the rail line really is, and how expensive it is.
Which would have been nice to have, I think, before we started this school consolidation project, because we all know that's what drove it to start.
Yep.
In 2021, that's what drove it to start, by somebody who's not even in town anymore. The person who filled out the application doesn't work here anymore. That person filled out an application without the feedback of the community to prioritize. When you fill out, the town keeps saying the state approved the consolidation. No, the state approved our recommendation to consolidate, and the recommendation came in an application of somebody who doesn't work here anymore. So we're talking about things in the past, I know, but the reason we're talking about Winthrop School at all isn't because we're concerned about improving. The school ratings have gone down every single year since I lived here. Every year, they go down.
Can we just stop, because the school consolidation, in my view, is a bit of a red herring, because just hypothetically, if there is no school consolidation, we can still have a form-based code for that site.
Definitely.
Because the Winthrop School is an old school, so in 10 or 15 years, long after we're off the planning board, that school may be obsolete, and everyone will agree that it's obsolete, and something else might happen to that site. That is the one site that the town owns. So it's not a bad idea to plan for that eventuality, and that's what Emil had said. The form-based code is not a code for today as much as it's a code for the future.
Or, in the flip side, how does maybe the form-based code supports the infrastructure around an elementary school that actually enhances and improves the access to Patton Park and the community house where all the kids go to school after, wherever everybody goes. I mean, hopefully the form-based code result supports something, basically a place in town that every single event starts and stops from.
You just segued into the point I wanted to make, which is we are focusing on, is economic development possible? Should the town have more commercial, less commercial, more students, less students? A lot of form-based code has nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with it. For example, the Winthrop School. There are opportunities, whether it's a school, a park, houses, or it just stays the way it is. There are opportunities in form-based code just to connect things better. What if you could get to that site in a pleasant way from Hamilton Crossing, up the Greenway on the gas pipeline that looped around beautifully to Patton Park, and Patton Park had a lovely entrance instead of just a mud pit, a poorly drained mud pit for an entrance. What if? Okay, form-based code covers those kinds of things. So the other thing I'd like to just mention, I acknowledge that all of the studies are important, watching that we don't inadvertently step into something that's negative. But there's also, let me just give a quick anecdote of part of why this is important. I have a niece who grew up in Hamilton, went through the whole Hamilton school system. She got married, got a really nice house, 2-acre zone, single-family house, and started bringing up her kid there and said, this isn't working for me. I want to be downtown. So she moved downtown. I just interviewed her 8-year-old, I guess that's I don't know what my relation that is to me, interviewed him for about 15 minutes. Where do you like living better, in the, where you were before or downtown? He went on and on and on how much better downtown was for him. He could walk to see his friends, ride his bike to see his friends, get downtown easily. It was just so much more fun for him and so much better for my niece. And she got to compare and contrast. So back to form-based code is about giving choices. choices for different ways to have your house relate to the downtown, sizes of houses, sizes of lots, maintenance on lots. This isn't all negative. This isn't all fear. There's a lot of great stuff embedded in here, and it's just helpful not to lose sight of it. That's all.
Okay, so can we move on? I would, oh, sorry, I apologize.
A question here for Jonathan.
Can you,
Yep.
you go to the microphone?
Jack Davis, Lois Street, appreciate your work. And this actually follows your comment, Mr. Poor, because I was going to ask the question whether form-based planning, which I support, by the way, philosophically also includes the idea of connectivity. And let me just reference, I think, a concern that Marnie raised years ago as to how to better connect different parts of downtown, like Railroad Avenue, the shopping center, the community center, and Patton Park, so that it's more walkable and that you promote community and reasons for people to come downtown. I mean, we live downtown and love the walkability, but to create more connectivity, I mean, I think conceptually that's a little bit different from just mixed use on a given site, which, so am I correct in saying that the
Capital
idea of
A,
connectivity?
absolutely.
Okay.
Capital A, absolutely.
Okay. Good. Well,
Actually, we applaud that.
yes, well, I just hope that will, not get derailed, because in the prior meeting at the middle school, the whole discussion about form-based and sort of the macro picture was derailed by all of this 3A concern, and we understand that. So connectivity, yes.
So let me just wrap up. I mean, my hope is that we can develop this form-based code, and that can be something that's presented to the town, maybe apart from 3A. Because I think that when people really understand the benefits of a form-based code and understand that it's not just about buildings and businesses, that it is connectivity and making the town just a more delightful place to be, and to be able to walk and appreciate the Patton Park and have the entrance instead of a parking lot, perhaps something a little more aesthetically pleasing and more in the vein of Frederick Law Olmsted than a parking lot. So let's move on. I mean, it would be amazing if we had a planning board meeting that actually ended before 8:15. It might be a first.
Did we set where we are on the economic study? I know that we asked about it, and you had indicated that you'd hope UTIL had one. They don't. So where do we lay on that? Are we going to try to push for one on UTIL or somewhere else?
Yeah, that's gonna come up we need to let UTIL go a little bit further on this, but there's gonna be a back and forth between the community, the town, and the consultant on that. And that's a key question to ask, so.
So your expectation is that UTIL will have somebody on their team that will be doing an economic study?
I can't promise that, but that was one of the, when we wrote the RFQ, scope of services, we were looking for a multidisciplinary team to come in there for that very reason, that you had different disciplines who were engaged, whether it's traffic, whether it's engineering for, wastewater treatment, or for certainly economic study, to sort of set the overall guidelines for what can happen. So.
Okay. So if no one has any other comments, let's move on to minutes. So we have 2 sets of minutes.
Oh, there's one, before we get to minutes. Do we have any update on the Gordon Conwell?
My understanding is that there's a joint venture who has entered into a purchase and sale agreement with the seminary. I don't know the terms of that, obviously, but there is agreement that 25% of the apartments will be affordable at 80% of AMI, which
Okay.
would be an enormous benefit to the town,
Right.
which would
It makes
get-
total, makes.
gets us over the 10% and puts us in safe harbor
Right.
for at
It makes,
least
it makes total,
several
it makes
years.
total sense. The question I have is given that you will have that objective, the 25%, is it necessary to rezone that part of, or all of Gordon Conwell? Or can they sail through from dormitories to 40B housing without a rezoning?
Well, that will be something that we can discuss with the select board. I think that's that's a question, and we should dig deep into that and see how they're approaching this.
Right. If it was going to be all market rate housing, then it would require rezoning. So the issue is, does the 40B, which carries all sorts of exemptions, exempt them from making that transition?
We'll have to explore
That's
that
pretty,
a little.
that's it. Patrick, do you have any?
The developer's legal team has a premise that they believe there's case law that allows for Dover Amendment protected units to be redeveloped so long as there's not development outside of the envelope of the actual buildings that were built. And
So
on-
that's just like a hardship thing. It's you have all these facilities. We don't, it's unreasonable to have you tear them down. So as long as you don't,
Yeah, I don't know
that's
how
a little
to
more
best characterize it.
dubious. That's an
think-
interesting issue.
I think they're considering it a pre-existing non-conforming use, and frankly, I have conceptually some difficulty wrapping my head around having a commercial entity reap the benefit of the Dover Amendment. But putting all that aside, I think that the 25% affordable units are such an enormous benefit to the town that I would like to see how all this unfolds.
Right, but it greatly, influences our role in this, right? If
Right.
we have to come up with a rezoning as opposed to
Right.
just saying this thing can sail through.
I think that the premise of the developers in the seminary is that rezoning is not necessary. But we need to explore that, and I think
But
it's.
the other thing I was told by my commercial buddies is there was in fact zero interest in corporate use of the top of the hill. It was kind of, they took a bunch of people up there, they looked at it, there was no expansion potential, it just did not meet that need. So that was another factor that came into play in the seminary's, decision about staying there. The fact it wasn't going to be some really lucrative alternative use. So sooner, at some point in the future, we'll have to deal with that, but,
Right. Well,
Another
I-
puzzle with dividing off the dorms is the whole infrastructure question. It's all shared infrastructure, and how that possibly works under separate ownership is
Absolutely.
beyond me.
Right.
well, they'll build some other facility for the
Well, they
theological.
would have to do some
They'll figure it out.
finagling, because there can only be one operator of the existing stormwater management system. You can only have one operator, so whether they had some kind of condominium agreement so that the seminary managed the stormwater, I don't have any of those details, and I would be
It will all
very
be an
interested in.
interesting set of details to unfold before us.
Right,
And they're
Okay.
they're all within a GPOD district, too.
right,
Yes.
yes, and I pointed that out, I think, years ago.
Yeah.
You discovered it,
Yeah.
and we pointed it out. And so far, the crickets on that issue. So, can we turn to minutes now?
Yep.
2 sets of minutes. I think I went through those minutes. I did find a couple of errors. I know in the June 18th minutes, some of the members who were present were not listed. And in the July 2nd minutes, it was listed as a public meeting and with Zoom access, and it was entirely a Zoom meeting. That was the meeting, but we dealt with Jeff Alslop and his plans for the Gardner Street property. So I made those corrections and a few stylistic changes, and I know there might be one typo that I corrected. Darcy just sent me a quick email about that, and so if anybody has any comment, discussion on the minutes, speak now.
Shall I make a motion?
Please do.
Okay, help me with the dates. I move that we vote to approve the minutes from
June 18th
June 18th
and July 2nd.
and July 2nd.
Second?
When I call your name, please indicate your assent. Pat Norton,
Norton, aye?
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil Dahlquist.
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Darcy Dale,
Darcy Dale, aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye.
So, Madam Chair, there's one other piece of business that I would love to just touch on briefly. And a number of weeks ago, Jeff Austin put out a request for some guidance on how to get up to speed, and I sort of didn't really see much response on that. And I would love to take a couple minutes and talk about that, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
And I'd love to have the board participate in that as well. So I had never served on a planning board before. I'd served on a number of other types of boards. And I'm quite familiar with zoning and regulations and whatnot, having been on both sides of the table. So I would love to have folks just add wisdom. There's other people who haven't, who are newer to the board. I would love to have a little bit of a quick discussion on, what some tips and helpful hints are to get up to speed. I can tell you what I did is I read, first thing I did is I read the master plan, the old master plan. That's the first thing I did. And then I started reading the regulations and the bylaws.
Yeah, that's what I did. I
Just read them from cover to cover.
Cover to cover.
And I started marking them up and seeing if I could find some questions in
I
them.
skipped the
Patrick can attest, I would bug him with questions early on.
I think I skipped the stuff on the cell towers, but I read all the others.
Yeah.
And then I went back and started reading the minutes. But unfortunately, our minutes are not quite where they should be. That's a separate area of discussion. But reading our zoning bylaw, that's a good start. And then going back and reading some of the minutes and trying to understand, what is a special permit, what's site plan review. I mean, site plan review is a really strange animal. It's really custom, if you will. It's not statutory, unlike special permits. But really, just reading our zoning bylaws is a real good first step, especially because our master plan charges us with addressing some of its provisions, in particular the open space and farmland development bylaw and whatnot. And so tonight's not the night, but and maybe at our next meeting or a subsequent meeting, we can look at the master plan. We know what our priority items are, but we can talk through how we want to approach some of the potential amendments to the bylaw that are suggested in the master plan. And I also note that the Affordable Housing Trust, at my suggestion, had made some suggested amendments to that section of the zoning bylaw, and we have to at some point put that on our agenda, because as you recall, in the context of the 133 Essex Special Project, we had to consult with town council over the interpretation of one of the provisions of the inclusionary housing bylaw. So we have lots to talk about.
There's one rule that's very useful. The list of things that you cannot do is much longer than the list of things that you can do. And the list of things that you can do is basically to implement the bylaws that have been specified, all right? I mean, some people come to the board and think, I'm gonna, change the world or something like that, and changing the world is not a very nice idea, but, it's not one of the things, it's one of the things you cannot do, okay? That's the way to think about it.
I would also say that the planning board is independent. We are elected officials, just like the select board and the assessors, the moderator. And we also act as a check and balance on concentration of power, because that can happen occasionally.
Anybody else that's elected besides selectmen and us?
No, well, the assessors, the
assessor,
moderator,
The moderator.
there might be one or two others.
Yeah.
But it's really important to remember that
Town clerk,
everything
yeah.
we do is for the benefit of the town. They're the beneficiaries of everything that we do. And I think that's really important. We should keep that in mind at all times.
And that's why it's so important if, when the public comes and we participate
yes.
in our meetings. I mean,
Bridget.
we are elected by the public, but if we never hear from them, then,
Yes.
I mean, Jack, you're an old standby, so.
The other thing I would say is, for me, it's an endless learning curve. So whenever something new comes up, like stormwater or something like that, I try to follow the trails, follow the trail into the state regulations and follow the trail into best practices. And so for me, it's just a constant learning curve. And, for me, it's interesting. Some things are less interesting to me, but the learning curve, like I say, is kind of endless. So, but from your perspective, what do you feel like are the most kind of overwhelming pieces of the process?
Knowing where to start was really overwhelming, and then knowing what's I guess to what Will said, what is within our control and what's not. What are we, and a lot of these topics come up, and I'm not sure, because I don't have the context of what we're allowed to enforce or not enforce or suggest or imply. I sit here and I just try to absorb as much as I can. And I go to a lot of other meetings. I go to the select board meetings. I go to school board meetings, just trying to absorb who manages who. Are different boards independent? The school board still baffles me. How all the different boards play into each other and what each one's responsibility is, and how do they influence their, I don't want to say power, but their objectives. So trying to understand all that
Soft power.
dynamic first is a good start for me.
Let me just, before you say something, Patrick, this town is unique because it's small, but because it has a combined planning and zoning. Zoning is black and white, as Bill was saying. You want to know what you're supposed to do, it's all written down for you, and you have to study and read it word by word to kind of, well, what's the subtext here? But planning's a little bit more free-ranging, I think. So we wear two hats, and depending on what the particular subject is, there's actually quite a difference in terms of philosophy. What does a planning board do? What does a zoning board do? So it's unique here. So you have to have multi-hats, but I agree.
There's another board that's a zoning board, is there not?
ZBA.
It's the zoning
Yeah.
board of
That's
appeals.
ZBA, yeah.
So
Yeah.
how does that differentiate from what we're doing?
The state, and Patrick can tell you, the state specifically says what's the purview of a ZBA and a planning board.
As does our zoning bylaw.
Yeah.
Yeah, the zoning bylaw
Um,
addresses that.
A couple of footnotes that I think might be helpful to you. When you look at state law regarding planning boards, the way that their language is written, there are two main responsibilities of a planning board. The first is to administer the zoning bylaw or the zoning ordinance if you're in a city. The other, which this board has just done, is to review and approve the master plan for the community. So you've seen a lot in a short amount of time, which I hope is helpful. One of the important things that I find myself unfortunately having to be the heavy often about is the open meeting law. And that's one of the things that is really important, that planning board communications be public. And, we try not to have full board communications that could be construed as being deliberation. That's where we want to stay away from and keep those in full public view.
Yeah, that one has me more nervous about what I communicate on the email. I saw there was one that came across this week. It was from a member of the board, but it was from her own personal email. So does that make it as a resident inquiry at that point? And does it not adhere to OML at that point?
What you have to look at is, if I were a regular person detached from the board and I saw that member writing on a topic that would lead me to believe that's a board opinion, that is what you don't want to do. There are very fine lines that I think are sometimes broken and sometimes not, but in your heart of hearts, you know what perception, people are going to bring when you make a public comment in an email. But the other part of this that I sometimes struggle with is that each of the folks in this room are public, private individuals who have, constitutional rights to have opinions. What's really important is to study the board code of ethics.
Yeah, the code of conduct, that's really important, because with all these controversies in town, you can take whatever position you want as an individual, but when you speak, you have to really be clear that you are speaking as a person, as an individual, and not for the planning board. And that can be cloudy, because, I think that the town has taken a very nuanced approach to 3A. And so when we speak about it, we have to be really careful, because, there's a spectrum of opinion about it. And, we want to be circumspect. And if we have strong opinions that may not reflect the entire opinion of the board, you want to be clear that you're speaking for yourself and not the board.
Yeah, Patrick told me something early on when I first joined. All messages should go through him. So if there's any doubt, you send it to Patrick, and he will decide whether to copy other people or not, because he's the gatekeeper really for the town in terms of open meeting law, and so that was useful.
And for all those reasons, that's why I brought this conversation up in the meeting rather than answering your email.
No, I appreciate it, thank you. And there was many of you that did respond to me, just individually saying, we can meet up. So it's okay, again, not to harp on that, but OML, I can meet with any one of you, just one-on-one.
Oh, to have
As
a
long as
cup of
there's no
coffee,
quorum.
Yeah, as
As
long,
long as there's no quorum. No, I think it's 5 for this board, 3 for the select board.
but we have to be careful about that. I mean, town council has
Town
always
council says
been
something different, yeah.
Very, very circumspect about
Yeah.
getting more than 3 people together, and even 3 is a little
Yeah.
dicey. But three, you get to 4 or 5, and then you have a perception problem.
Okay.
So that, it's the perception that, so,
And perception affects your effectiveness as a board,
right.
so it's
exactly,
very real.
exactly.
Thank you, Jonathan, for bringing this up.
So I'm hoping, that we can have a constructive meeting with the select board about the master plan, and we could also, since we all have so much free time and can meet anytime, any place, a workshop might be a good idea where we can parse the master plan and think about how we want to, proceed. And instead of sitting in this kind of forum, there are provisions, Patrick, for like a workshop format. They're recorded, but they're more informal. Am I correct?
Sure.
So we could do that. So the last meeting not the very last, but the second to the last meeting of the select board was a quote-unquote workshop, and they were all jumping up, well, they weren't jumping at that. They were eating pizza, okay? So they shared the pizza and had a more free-form discussion than what would be had if they were in front of an audience and whatnot. So that's something we might consider at some point,
Like a retreat.
like a retreat,
I'd
exactly.
be happy to host at New England Biolabs.
Really?
Yeah.
Let's take them up on it.
Yeah, I bet they have a nice meeting room with a kitchen and all sorts
Yeah.
of stuff like that, right?
We could have some fun in the meeting rooms there, yeah. But talking about the next meeting anyways, so we don't have, the master plan's approved, there's no comprehensive plan.
Next meeting, stormwater management regulation.
Oh, shoot. I was gonna make a motion to cancel the next, because it's only a couple more weeks before school starts, Patrick is gonna be out, there's nothing really being imposed on
Oh,
us
no,
as part of an
stormwater
agenda.
management.
Ah,
We gotta
dang
get
it.
those-
We still have the Wenham Zoom meeting, don't we?
Yeah, we have the
The advertising schedule we need to follow, we won't be able to do it on the 20th. So that's gonna need to be on September the 10th for the stormwater management thing, because we're not meeting on that first week of September.
Why can't we do it at our next meeting in August?
Because we need 2 weeks for it to be in the paper, plus a week at the Salem Evening News ahead of time, so that's gonna need to be at a subsequent meeting.
So given the recent information, I'd like to make a motion, we cancel the August 20th hearing.
Second?
Well, let's be clear, we have Patrick, we have no site plan review, we have no, I know from the select board meeting, because Goodhue Street is a scenic road, I believe, was a plan to reduce the speed limit to 25 miles an hour, and we need to
Next night,
rule on that, but that won't be ready for us by the 20th, yes or no?
No, and because that's simply a speed matter and not a physical dimensioning matter, I'm not thinking that needs to be before the planning board.
Well, put it this way, if it doesn't need to be before the planning board, that's fine, but I'm very supportive of reducing the speed limit on Goodhue Street.
There was a mention of putting up Jersey barriers, and that's where
Oh, that
the
may,
idea was to go.
And limiting truck size, commercial
Right,
trucks,
right,
which would
right.
go a long way.
So whatever is necessary to increase safety on that road and reduce speed and get rid of big trucks, I'm all in favor of it. I mean, I've driven on that road, and it's, it is a scenic road, and
can I throw a monkey wrench into the works? On
Kill my
August,
motion?
not, well, going back to demands on the planning board, on August the 21st, we do have the ability to attend, if the board so chooses, with Wenham's meeting on their 3A project. And that would be an all Zoom meeting.
on the 21st.
Yes, that'd be a Wednesday.
Do we have a time and a link on that yet?
Don't have the link yet, but they start at 7.
So right now, we have nothing concrete on our agenda for the 20th.
0.
So
I make a motion that we not have a meeting on the 20th.
I think you just did. And I
You
seconded.
did? I
you're
second it.
seconding.
Okay.
This could be my first
Now we
motion.
get to discuss it.
Stealing your thunder.
Madam Chair, do you wish to make a roll call?
I think we'll have a roll call vote on that. Pat Norton, I know how you're voting.
Aye, Pat Nolan.
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Whedon, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Darcy Dale.
Darcy Dale, aye.
Marty Crouch, I'll go along, I'll go with the flow. I could see that we could get some work done, but I'll go with the flow on this one because I have company coming in the day after. The 22nd, so the meeting on the 21st, the Zoom meeting with Wenham, that can serve as instead of our meeting on the 20th.
Great.
We'll go with that.
Okay.
So any other board business?
Motion to adjourn?
Absolutely.
possible for an audience member to ask a question?
Sure.
Okay.
At the podium, please.
Robin Davis, Lois Street, right over there in the great downtown Hamilton. Can you advise me? We have tried to do some little things around town. Most recently, some of us from the First Congregational Church in Hamilton have wanted to work on the bandstand, which, how many of you have taken a look at the bandstand?
Work.
Okay, it's not rocket science. It needs painting, and some of the rotten wood needs to be replaced. If it were our own homes, we'd be on the phone, or we'd be out there on Saturday doing it. We have very competent people. The church has been in town for 310 years. we'd like to do something to, bless the town. So I wrote to the town,
Town manager?
yes.
I think that would be something that he could address, or the select board could address, but
Well, what came back was, and thank you very much for what you do around town, blah, 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 very nice email, but liability. And I had taken photos and put some effort into this request, and so the steam went out. But I thought, wait a minute, there has to be some sort of insurance policy when people are all over Patton Park and they're doing stuff down there. Can you advise me? Because we'd like to do this project. The bandstand is an embarrassment. There are other things down there. There are 2 benches right in front of the bandstand. One of them is missing the top board. The top board was broken last year. Now the broken board is gone and there's just no board.
well,
it-
a master
I
plan?
can't advise you, but,
Okay.
does the church
Maybe they'll
have
address
some
it.
kind of umbrella policy? Because it might cover that.
Well, I can talk to Rosie.
Yeah, you could talk to, but with your congregational church, if it has an umbrella policy, you might be able to get some kind of,
Through the church?
through the church, if that's the issue.
Often you have to get one insurance company to talk to the other insurance company because insurance is so complicated in construction.
Well, do people never do any volunteer work in town? Like, what about a parent who goes into the school and does something? Does the town not have insurance that would cover townspeople doing things? Or does everything have to be done by professionals?
Well, that's a good question.
Well, we have
Yeah,
Boy Scouts that
Yeah,
create and maintain and do things for the town.
I was gonna say the same thing.
Yeah,
They build benches, they build signs, they, they do a lot of work for the
yeah,
town.
they do.
Well, they
There
build
must be a
their,
way to do it.
they
They
build,
did some work
yeah.
for the senior center too. Maybe the senior center would know how to go about.
Talk to Rosie, maybe she can sort through,
Yeah.
get some information about.
Okay, so you don't have any
No, but
instant
you know
answers?
what? I have to say, this is a joke, but went through my head as a bankruptcy lawyer, when people offer you money, take it. So I'm kind of dumbfounded that you didn't get a yes, but, I get the
Well,
liability.
I am too, because we've lived on Lower Street for, our oldest child is 47, and he was 10 months old when we moved in. So we've lived here for a long time, and there's so many things around here, like at Patton Park. It's a great park, but the same broken stuff has been there, and the same lack of trees and lack of shade, and, all these things. Some of us could go down and plant some trees. Some of us, now obviously you need a plan before you do it.
Robin, we have a master plan for the Patton Park. They have created a master plan for Patton Park.
Does it include
It's supposed to
repairs or
include all kinds of.
bathrooms or?
Yes, it's supposed to be
Okay.
comprehensive. Does anyone know where it is?
It's available online.
DPW.
It's online.
And I think they have CPA money to make it happen, from what I understand.
In phases, not all at once, probably.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to look at that with you though too, because our family walks down, we saw you folks there with our kids. Those summer,
The
music
concerts.
sessions and the Sunday after, they have been so good. The music has been great,
Right,
and like the participation is amazing, and
right.
it's probably the most special thing that we've done when we come
Mhm.
here. Those sessions those things are so fun. It's like
Mhm.
everyone comes walking down and brings their blankets, and
Mhm.
the grandstand could use improvement.
Right. All right.
Well,
Patrick.
the other thing,
Talk.
maybe what could happen is if all the people who work signed liability waivers.
Well, that subject came up, and somebody said those things aren't any good. Now, you're an attorney, I mean, probably.
Well, yes, but I didn't practice, in the insurance field.
Okay,
But, a liability waiver, I mean, if it's a knowing waiver of a known right, I'm not sure you know.
Well, things that parents sign when your kid is going to go to a camp, you have to sign some kind of waiver.
But you would have to just waive any claim against the town if, you know, you happen to, you know, cut yourself using a saw. You know, so it might be that somebody could draft a waiver that would satisfy the town officials that, so that you could actually do that.
Well, you know what, I'll take it up with Rosie, but wouldn't it be nice on a higher level if we could cultivate a spirit of volunteerism? And we had a little group and we were pulling weeds on Railroad Avenue and cutting the suckers around the trees on Railroad Avenue. Well, it would be great if the DPW would cut those little suckers, you know, to make the trees look nicer. That's, the master plan is way up here, but down on the ground level, could we cut the suckers, you know?
Well, I would look into, you know, whether the church has an umbrella
Okay.
policy that could cover it, that wouldn't conflict with the town, but also a liability waiver. I know in the equestrian field, you know, there are big signs everywhere, you know, that say, you know, professionals are not liable, so, you know, if you have a riding instructor, they're not gonna be responsible if the girth on your saddle breaks
Okay,
when they're instructing you. So there might be some way of satisfying this. And maybe it would be that you can't use any kind of electrical equipment or anything that, you know, like a chainsaw that.
how about a paintbrush standing on the ground? Thank you.
Okay, now can we adjourn? I'm the first to say, I normally don't say this, but.
Did someone make a motion already?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I seconded it,
Did we
No, I
vote?
think we,
No.
and we
That was
didn't
to
vote.
cancel the meeting next week.
Yeah.
yeah, we canceled the meeting
Canceled.
next week. We have to terminate this one. So,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I don't think it's the chair, I can second it, but I'm tempted. Pat Norton,
Pat Norton, aye.
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil
Abel
Dahlquist.
Dahlquist, aye.
Darcy Dale, aye.
That's the only pain in the butt part about it, just the schlepping that thing around. Actually.